Oi! You know, the thing I love about this channel is 1 minute I could be just turning up to whatever music video, whatever artist, then the next minute we're talking about politics and socialism, which is what we're doing today. Hello my favorite people, we're comparing capitalism and socialism, not even just comparing, learning what the heck socialism is, because I, being an American, have always had the notion that socialism is bad. But the more I learn about it, the more I hear about it on Twitter, it's literally just like healthcare for all, government assistance for all, housing for all, dental care for all. It's support of the people, to what I'm understanding. Before I get too deep into it, let's get into the video. I have so many different thoughts. I want y'all to comment down below, retort to me, give me your different opinions, but yeah. Subscribe if you're new here, check out my other culture and like political videos if you want to. Like the videos so I can do more in the future, and DM me video requests over on Instagram. Here we go. Capitalism and socialism, a crash course. I'm excited! I wish I had a straw for my drink.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about capitalism. Yeah, Mr. Green, capitalism just turns men into wolves. Your purportedly free markets only make slaves of us all. Oh, God, Stan,
I mean, it's kind of true. Capitalism only works when there's a few at the top and everyone else at the bottom. You have to try to work your way to the top.
College. Me from the past has become me from college. This is a disaster. The reason he's so unbearable, Stan, is that he refuses to recognize the legitimacy of other people's narratives, and that means that he will never, ever be able to have a productive conversation with another human in his entire life. So listen, me from the past, I'm going to disappoint you by being too capitalist, and I'm going to disappoint a lot of other people by not being capitalist enough, and I'm going to disappoint the historians by not using enough
Basically what he's saying is he doesn't give a fuck, neither do I. It's his platform, he says what he wants. It's my platform, I say what I want. Okay, let's move on. Let's get into the meat of the video.
Going to work out with Emily, and do not go to Alaska with a girl you've known for 10 days. Okay, let's talk capitalism.
Murder! So far I like the dude. We'll give him a chance. Crash course.
So capitalism is an economic system, but it's also a cultural system. It's characterized by innovation and investment to increase wealth. But today we're going to focus on production and how industrial capitalism changed it. Stan, I can't wear these emblems of the bourgeoisie while Karl Marx himself is looking at me. It's ridiculous. I'm changing.
Oh my god.
Very hard to take off a shirt dramatically. So let's say it's 1200 CE and you're a rug merchant.
Okay, so he went from bourgeoisie to middle class. It's still higher up in the capitalistic system.
Like merchants today, you sometimes need to borrow money in order to buy the rugs you want to resell at a profit, and then you pay that money back, often with interest, once you've resold the rugs. This is called mercantile capitalism, and it was a global phenomenon, from the Chinese to the Indian Ocean Trade Network to Muslim merchants who would sponsor trade caravans across the Sahara. But by the 17th century, merchants in the Netherlands and in Britain had expanded upon this idea to create joint stock companies. Those companies could finance bigger trade missions and also spread the risk of international trade. But the thing about international trade is sometimes boats sink or they get taken by pirates, and while that's bad if you're a sailor,
insurance. That's why you have insurance. Did they not think of this back then?
You know, you lose your life. It's really bad if you're a mercantile capitalist because you lost all your money. But if you own 1/10 of 10 boats, your risk is much better managed. That kind of investment definitely increased wealth, but it only affected a sliver of the population, and it didn't create a culture of capitalism. Industrial capitalism was something altogether different, both in scale and in practice. Let's use Joyce Appleby's definition of industrial capitalism: an economic system that relies on investment of capital in machines and technology that are used to increase production of marketable goods. So imagine that someone made a stand machine. By the way, Stan, this is a remarkable likeness. And that stand machine could produce in direct...
But wait a minute. If you're replacing the people and their jobs with machines and robots, how is that really capitalist? Because you're taking away jobs from your people. Therefore, it's just about production and money. It's not about the people. When capitalism is, like, sold as an industry to help build everyone and give everyone an opportunity to get to the next level in economic status, no? Or I might be confusing socialism with capitalism. Is capitalism about money or the people? That's the question.
10 times more episodes of Crash Course than a human stand. Well, of course, even if there are significant upfront costs, I'm going to invest in a stand machine so I can start cranking out 10 times the knowledge. Stan, are you focusing on the robot instead of me? I am the star of the show! Stan, but you're going behind the globe. So when most of us think about capitalism, especially when we think about its downsides, long hours, low wages, miserable working conditions, child labor, unemployed stands, that's what we're thinking about. Now, admittedly, this is just one definition of industrial capitalism among many, but it's the definition we're going going with. Alright, let's go to the thought bubble. Industrial capitalism developed first in Britain in the 19th century. Britain had a bunch of advantages. It was the dominant power on the seas, and it was making good money off of trade with its colonies, including the slave trade. Also,
as soon as he said colonies, I kind of cringed. No offense, you guys. I love you, but your history is very unfortunate.
growth of capitalism was helped by the half-century of civil unrest that resulted from the 17th century English Civil War. Now, I'm not advocating for civil wars or anything, but in this particular case, it was useful because before the war, the British Crown had put a lot of regulations on the economy, complicated licenses, royal monopolies, etc. But during the turmoil, it couldn't enforce them, which made for freer markets. Another factor was a remarkable increase in agricultural productivity in the 16th century. As food prices started to rise, it became profitable for farmers, both large and small, to invest in agricultural technologies that would improve crop yields. Those higher prices for grain probably resulted from population growth, which in turn was encouraged by increased production of food crops. A number of these agricultural improvements came from the Dutch, who had chronic problems feeding themselves and discovered that planting different kinds of crops, like clover that added nitrogen to the soil and could be used to feed livestock at the same time, meant that more fields could be used at once.
Whoa! So the clover isn't even an Irish thing, it's a Dutch thing. So why the heck is every time you want to talk about the Irish, talk about freaking leprechauns, green clovers and all that stuff, when it was the Dutch who used it?
This increased productivity eventually brought down prices, and this encouraged further innovation in order to increase yield to make up for the drop in prices. Lower food prices had an added benefit. Since food cost less and wages in England remained high, workers would have more disposable income, which meant that if there were consumer goods available, they would be consumed, which incentivized people to make consumer goods more efficiently and therefore more cheaply. You can see how this positive feedback loop leads to more food and more stuff, culminating in a world where people have so much stuff that we must rent space to store it, and so much food that obesity has become a bigger killer than starvation.
Wow. You know, I've never even thought about it that way. Actually, my mom does tell me I'm very wasteful, which is a good thing but also a bad thing. It's a luxury that I'm even able to be wasteful. When I say wasteful, I mean like not finishing my food, buying groceries and then they expire so I throw them away. It's a luxury, I guess. Is there a downside? There is a downside, because I'm being wasteful. I don't know what I'm trying to get at. Never mind.
Thanks, Thought Bubble. So this increased productivity also meant that fewer people needed to work in agriculture in order to feed the population. To put this in perspective, in 1520, 80% of the English population worked the land. By 1800, only 36% of adult male laborers were working in agriculture, and by 1850, that percentage had dropped to 25. This meant that when the factory...
Is it because there was no productivity in the land anymore, or why did it drop so much?
...started humming, there were plenty of workers to hum along with them, especially child laborers.
Not good, not good.
So far, all this sounds pretty good, right? I mean, except for the child labor. Who wouldn't want more, cheaper food? Yeah, well, not so fast. One of the ways the British achieved all this agricultural productivity was through the process of enclosure, whereby landlords would reclaim and privatize fields that for centuries had been held in common by multiple tenants. This increased agricultural productivity, but it also impoverished many tenant farmers, many of whom...
If you're gonna steal their land, you gotta give them like a big lump sum of money at least, or you know, so you have to give something back to them. You can't just take their land. I hope they gave something back. And this is also making me realize, like, a lot of the stuff that he's talking about from the past is exactly the same today. It's just transformed. Like, child labor back then is still going on today. It's just not on the biggest scheme. You have to actually like look into the background and make sure companies are kind of clean. Like, they're not animal testing. They don't use overseas labor, you know, stuff like that. Everything is still kind of the same within capitalism. It's just evolved, I guess you could say. Not everything is so blatant anymore.
Their livelihoods. Okay, for our purposes, capitalism is also a cultural system rooted in the need of private investors to turn a profit. So the real change needed here was a change of mind. People had to develop the capitalist values of taking risks and appreciating innovation. And they had to come to believe that
the American dream, if you work hard enough, you can get whatever you want. But you're working in the capitalistic system. It's true.
making an upfront investment in something like a stand machine could pay for itself and then some. One of the reasons that these values developed in Britain was that the people who initially held them were really good at publicizing them. Writers like Thomas Munn, who worked for the English East India Company, exposed people to the idea that the economy was controlled by markets, and other writers popularized the idea that it was human nature for individuals to participate in markets as rational actors. Even our language changed. The word individuals did not apply to persons until the 17th century, and in the 18th century, a career still referred only to horses' racing lives. Perhaps the most important idea that was popularized in England was that men and women were consumers as well as producers, and that this was actually a good thing because the desire to consume manufactured goods could spur economic growth. The main spur to trade, or rather to industry and ingenuity, is the exorbitant appetite of men, which they will take pain to gratify. So wrote John...
What did he just say? The main spur to trade, or rather to industry, and ingenuity, I don't know what the
exorbitant
a lot of words.
Of men, which they will take pain to gratify. So wrote John Kerry, one of capitalism's cheerleaders in 1695. And in talking about our appetites, he wasn't just talking about food. That doesn't seem radical now, but it sure did back then. So here in the 21st century, it's clear that industrial capitalism, at least for now, has won. Sorry, buddy, but you know. You gave it a good run. You didn't know about Stalin. But capitalism isn't without its problems or its critics, and there were certainly lots of shortcomings to industrial capitalism in the 19th century. Working conditions were awful, days were long, arduous, and monotonous. Workers lived in conditions that people living in the developed world today...
Okay, so we completely understand that capitalism is just a facade. You're working towards something, but it's never going to get there, basically. I'm here to learn about socialism, so let's move on to that, shall we? I live in capitalism. I don't need to learn about it.
Border between Egypt and Libya. There were two branches of socialism in France, utopian and revolutionary. Utopian socialism is often associated with Comte de Saint-Simon and Charles Fourier, both of whom rejected revolutionary action after having seen the disaster of the French Revolution. Both were critical of capitalism, and while Fourier is usually a punchline in history classes because he believed that in his ideal socialist world the seas would turn to lemonade, he was right that human beings have desires that go beyond basic self-interest and that we aren't always economically rational actors. The other French socialists were the revolutionaries, and they saw the French Revolution, even its violence, in a much more positive light. The most important of these revolutionaries was Auguste Blanqui, and we associate a lot of his ideas with communism, which...
Sorry to interrupt, but this may come as a shock to you. I've never learned about the French Revolution. The only revolutions or wars I've learned about are the World Wars and the American Wars. If we were fighting there, then it mattered. If it didn't learn about it. So maybe we'll research or react to the French Revolution, if it's so relevant to socialism.
Term that he used. Like the utopians, he criticized capitalism, but he believed that it could only be overthrown through violent...
Tits out.
Communist world. He was an elitist, and he believed that workers could never on their own overcome their superstitions and their prejudices in order to throw off bourgeois oppression. And that brings us to Karl Marx, whose ideas and beard cast a shadow over most of the 20th century.
Okay, but whatever Frenchman said that is 1,000% right. Because we were even talking about this in America, this last presidential run, people were saying, like, why are these people in the lowest standard of economic life in America trying to argue and support the 1%? You know, talking about taxes, Biden wants to raise our taxes. They don't even fit into the class that these new laws or regulations would apply to. So, like, you can't get rid of all these opinions for the betterment of your country, basically, is what socialism was saying.
That's the open letter.
But it's proved to work, socialism.
An open letter to Karl Marx's beard. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today.
Enough with these dang robots. What is this?
Go turn the camera off. Hey there, Karl Marx's beard. Wow. You are intense! Karl Marx, these days there are a lot of young men who think beards are cool. Beard lovers, if you will. Those aren't beards, they're glorified milk mustaches. I mean, I haven't shaved for a couple weeks, Karl Marx, but I'm not claiming a beard. You don't get a beard by being lazy, you get a beard by being a committed revolutionary. That's why hardcore Marxists are literally known as bearded Marxists. These days, that's an insult. But you know what, Karl Marx? When I look back at history, I prefer the bearded communists. Let's talk about some communists who didn't have beards. Mao Zedong, Pol Pot,
Socialism! Socialism!
Because he co-wrote the Communist Manifesto. Marx was above all a philosopher and a historian. It's just that unlike most philosophers and historians, he advocated for...
Alright guys, We're gonna have to do another video. I don't know what this dude's going on about with marks and beards and stuff. Is that relevant? Let me know. Or give me a link to another socialism video, because I feel like I barely even got into the grid of it. We barely even touched the surface. Man. Okay, we learned a lot about capitalism, no denying that, but we didn't know anything about socialism. Ugh, whatever. Subscribe if you're new here, like the video, give me some suggestions, DM them to me over on Instagram, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.